I'm here today with the most wonderful man I've met, and he's going to tell me and you about his life. He was in the military during World War II, and he has a lot to say for the future of the youth and the military, and about honor and a perspective that is different than what we have seen today. And we should honor them with all we have, because they are why we are here today. They fought, and without them fighting, it would be no tomorrow. So today I'd like to introduce you, Leon, a friend and a wonderful person. And I would love for him to tell us why he joined the war during the 1930s, I think it happened. So Leon, in your own words.
The choice was mine as to what operation I would like to belong to, because I needed to join in this terrible thing against Hitler. And first thing I did was go to the Coast Guard, because I was working in a place where they sold implements for the military, and they had ins with the Coast Guard and the Navy, and I figured I'd get in with the Coast Guard and the Navy right away. But the Navy, the Navy and the Coast Guard both turned me down because my eyesight wasn't quite up to their specs. I was drafted a few weeks later by the Army, in which I was very happy to join at the time. I was scared but happy, and joined the group of fellows from our neighborhood who were going up to Fort Ord to be indoctrinated. And that was my introduction into the Army at that time. I immediately was put on a train with a whole bunch of us from that area, which happened to be the east side of Los Angeles, Boyle Heights. Now, we got to spend about 4 or 5 days on this train, as I remember it. I don't recall. Going north. We didn't know where. I was told by the sergeant who was in charge of us on the train that I was to be a clerk typist because of what I had taken in school as a commercial course. And I never saw a typewriter in the Army. No. I was immediately put into the headquarters 1st Battalion of the 363rd Infantry Battalion of the 91st Division. And as a private, I was run through these terrible Oregon rainstorms, and it was November, December, and I think it must have rained for at least 100 days. And we trained in the mud, push-ups, whatever they had us do. The boy at that point was rapidly becoming a man, and I had to live up to all the future and the present time situations then that I had to in order to get by. And but the thing that changed my life at that time was I hated to do kitchen police, KP as we used to call it, because there was very little sleep for 2 days as you work hard and you serve the guys, and it was just a pressure thing. So I decided I better do something about this. I became a corporal. How did I become a corporal? I studied map reading. I figured map reading would give me an in with the officers and at least put me on a better footing where I could become a corporal. It worked. I became a corporal within the next 60 days. After that, I worked with my group of my platoon, about 10 men, and we processed how all of us could get stronger, how all of us get better in everything we did, in order to fight the battles. Every one of my 10 men were wonderful guys from all over the United States. And we go from there.
Okay, so did you become good friends with any of these young men?
Well, I felt like their father at that point.
Okay.
And I became a staff sergeant because we went on maneuvers, and I met with the colonel of our regiment, who was with me at headquarters, as I was observing the enemy, so-called red and blue enemies, from our observation post. He took a liking to me because he thought I had some spectacular talent to observe, in which case, because of the map reading and that, I was, throughout the entire training time and war, I was a staff sergeant, battalion intelligence sergeant, they called it, for the group. And I loved the work. I also was a singer. I was a singer. Nobody seemed to know about my musical background, but I was a singer, and I sang different churches in the Army and things of that nature. We did a few radio broadcasts, and I was suddenly pulled out of the day before we were to go overseas. We were pulled out of I was pulled out of my headquarters to go to Special Service, Division Special Service, to join their group, which would have put me in the background of what I had trained my men to do, and I was trained to do, for the front lines. And I kicked up a fuss, and the colonel ultimately let me get back to my outfit after moving to headquarters. And so I spent probably a half an hour at headquarters, division headquarters, before I was returned to my own headquarters and to do what I had to do with my guys. I lost half of those beautiful men in the war, and I missed them every year, every day.
Let me ask you this. So when did you leave America and touch ground in the war? Was it in Italy first? Was it in France? What was the first spot?
We boarded a train and headed for Virginia, and our port of departure would have been Newport News, Virginia. And we stayed in Fort Patrick Henry there for a few days, and then transferred out to the Liberty ship that took us 3 weeks of seasickness and everything else before we arrived at Oran, Algeria, in North Africa. And we did 2 more months of training against pillboxes and that type of thing, Bangalore torpedoes, etc., and landings, shore landings, before they took us on another ship to Italy, to Naples. And in 2 days after we landed in Naples, we were put on a truck and headed for our first day of battle. And would you believe the date of that first day of battle was July 4th, 1944.
1944?
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
And 1944 on, we had to fight through these Germans who knew we were greenhorns
Is that what they call newbies?
We were babies in the Army, and we had to learn to hate. And we did that very quickly with the Germans. And we went from there to every little stop in Tuscany, every little town in Tuscany in which we participated in the war. And then after the war ended in 1945, we were sent to Yugoslavia to handle problems we were having with Tito. Tito wanted to take an area of Italy, and he said that was Yugoslavia. It really wasn't. It was the area near Trieste, a lovely area. And they put me in charge of driving around the city of Trieste. I was to take notes of wherever Tito had his company of men. Very few in uniform, but they were dressed as just the average guy. And they would be on street corners and on balconies and wherever, taking care of their area. And I had to tell headquarters where they were so that we could put men across the street. And that's the way I ran the next 2 months in Trieste, as free as a bird in my Jeep and Jeep driver, and would drive us all over the city and the outskirts. We stayed in a wonderful castle that seemed to overlook the ocean and everything, but we slept on the floor at the time. And everything was rugged and rough, but we did what we had to do.
So my question to you, you said you had to learn how to hate. What did you mean by that?
Well, all of us in the Army at that time were green, and city boys. Some were country boys, some were city boys. But we all didn't know how to kill. And killing was the important thing. I learned how to kill, I became crazy. I became the nut. They used to make fun of me. They called Eagle Eye Weckstein. I'd be at the telescope, nothing like you had, nothing like your equipment. Our telescope was about a foot and a half long, and it was a GI scope. And I would spend morning before dawn, about an hour before dawn till an hour after dark, looking through the telescope, spotting German positions, and firing every artillery weapon we could, mortars and artillery shells. And that was my job in the Army. And apparently I did it well.
Okay. You said to me a while back that when you were in Italy, that you saw the very first black troops that came into Italy. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yes, occasionally we get a few days off. We get 2 or 3 days off, and we go to the nearest city, such as Florence or Montecatini, and I ran into all kinds of kids from all kinds of countries. And there was the Israelis, there were the British from all over the world, and there was the black fellas. And I talked to them. I didn't know much about what they were doing, but I was curious, and I read a lot about what they were doing at the time. Most of them, oddly enough, were led by white officers, and it was a very interesting thing to me how they would handle it. That's the way it was as far as my memory of the 88th Division. I think that was the number. Who were generally somewhere nearby us in the battlefront.
Okay. Now, do you remember how they were treated and how you were treated?
No, they never complained.
Okay.
They never complained. They were in the Army, and we were all in the Army together, and we were all in the messy situation of being in the Army at the time. You slept on the floor. You did all kinds of crazy things if you got to sleep.
How was the people of Italy towards you?
The people of Italy were wonderful. I fell in love with the people of Italy. In my heart today, I feel like I'm almost half Italian, because the first major relationship I formed in Italy was in the we were going to attack the Gothic line, which was the Apennine Mountains, and they sent in a bunch of partisan young fellas who were going to help us through this Italian situation because they were familiar with everything in the area. We weren't. And I fell in love with one particular young man who likewise kind of took on to me too. He was a Roman kid, lived in Florence, but he was very active in the partisan movement, the resistance movement, is the more correct term to call it. And I spent a lot of time with him. He spent a lot of time with me. He took me home to his home in Florence occasionally on rest periods, and met his family and had a lot of fun there.
Let me ask you this. Did you have any opportunity to go up into Germany, or did you stay only in Italy and Yugoslavia?
That was the limitation, Italy and Yugoslavia. We never reached the northern areas because the war was over. 1945, May 1945, the war was over. And some of us were luckier than others to get home earlier. I had the points because of the awards I was given for my duties, and I was one of the guys that was sent home earlier. I got home 4 months after the war was over, so I never got up into the northern countries.
So you never saw any concentration camps at all? Just heard,
no,
basically just hear about them.
I avoid them. I've seen them on television, of course, and I know what they do and what they did. And of course, it's easy to hate.
When you see something like that, yeah.
And I do hate, but I do go back occasionally. I did go back to Germany on a number of occasions, and met wonderful German people who, of course, never were Nazis.
Yeah.
But they were nice people. And as a matter of fact, they turned out to be, probably would turn out to be nice people after Hitler.
Yeah. After Hitler promised them everything, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
So, your awards. Talk to us about the awards that you won. Or, I don't know if you could say one.
The highest award was the Legion of Merit, which is very rarely given to anybody in the field. Yeah, it's quite often given to admirals and generals and people of that nature. But if, two of us were on the parade that day when we were awarded the Legion of Merit out of 3,000 men. So
what is it? What does it mean?
Well, let's look at the book. And,
okay, because, okay.